Hey everybody, Dave Hathaway. Welcome to another educational episode. Today I actually wanted to discuss house hacking and how it can be an easier path to wealth if you use it correctly. The other thing I'm going to chat about is actually how I did my first house hack and actually how it took me from here to there in my path to financial success. So what is house hacking? First off, house hacking is when you rent out a portion of the house that you live in to pay for your rent, your mortgage, your housing expense. Now, there was an interesting statistic that I looked up on Google before I did this video, and that was 33.3% of our income goes towards housing expenses on average in the US. Now, if you make $100,000, that means that $33,300 is going to pay for housing. That is a lot. Now let's imagine that you didn't have to have that it could be zero. And that's where house hacking comes in. So what we're trying to do with house hacking is reduce the biggest expense we have in housing. So now let's go over to my journey and how I did it and how you can do it too. So there's multiple ways to house hack, but back in 2010, I had finished up college a year or so earlier, graduated from George Mason, and I decided I was going to be a police officer. So I joined the police force. Luckily, I was grateful to join Metro Transit Police Department in downtown DC, became a police officer, and then I decided, hey, I want to purchase another house. I'd already purchased my first investment property, but I wanted to purchase a house that I lived in so I didn't have to live with my parents. I ended up purchasing a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bathroom townhouse located in 15271 Lodge Terrace, Woodbridge, Virginia, 22191. And we'll show a bunch of the pictures before and afters of what I did to it, what it looked like at the purchase. I think I purchased it for right around $90,000 back in the day, so super inexpensive. And I only had to do a few renovations, but back then I had a lot more time. I didn't have so many rental properties, so I did a lot of stuff myself. I had a contractor that I really liked. He was a neighbor. He was renovating the kitchen, and actually the kitchen cabinets today are ones that he was taking out that somebody else was replacing, and I said, hey, I'll take those. And I actually took them, installed them myself in that townhouse with a white IKEA looking cabinet. I made the kitchen look nice, put granite countertops in, redid some of the bathrooms. I think I retiled the master bath and made it really nice for myself. So once I finally got this townhouse ready, I lived in the master that had a master bathroom. And then I rented out the other 3 bedrooms to tenants, to roommates, whatever you want to call it. And this is where the magic comes in. So those tenants paid between $350 and $400, depending on if they had a dedicated bathroom or if they had a shared bathroom. So I ended up making somewhere around $1,300 in rent from them, and my mortgage was somewhere around $800. So in essence, when I paid my mortgage, my utilities, internet, and all my expenses, I ended up making about $75 to $100 a month, and I got to live in the master bedroom. So I always used to say this thing to my parents. I used to say, hey mom, hey dad, if I was living at your house, I'd actually be losing money. So how can you lose money if you're living at, let's say, a parent's house for free? You're losing the $75 or the $100 that you'd be making in the other property. And not only would you be making $75 or $100, you'd also get all the tax benefits that come along with owning real estate, and you'd also get the tenants that are paying down the mortgage each month. So you get principal pay down, which is another huge benefit. So they're paying my entire mortgage. So my mortgage every month is going to go down and down and down and down. So those are some of the great things. So instead of having 33% of my income going towards housing or paying the mortgage and everything else, I had 0%. I would actually having real estate pay me, and then I was taking that money that would have been going to pay my mortgage and everything else, and I was putting it in to other rental properties. So I was getting multiple properties, 1 every year, 2 every year, 3 every year, and then I was building up a portfolio. So instead of having the biggest expense that most people have, which is their housing expense, you're basically using house hacking as a strategy, as a tool to build your wealth quicker, if that makes sense. Now, there's a few different ways that you can use this strategy, and it doesn't always mean that you're going to get money after your expenses. Sometimes it means you're just taking away part of your expenses. Instead of paying 33% of your income towards housing expenses, maybe you rent out a room, and maybe that cuts down your mortgage in half. So instead of paying 33%, you're only paying 15%. And this only works, this skill or this strategy only works to building your wealth if you're taking that money that you're saving that otherwise would be going towards housing expenses and you're putting it towards investments. You're putting it in the stock market, you're putting in real estate. Then it starts to be really advantageous. And this is how I started. And when other maybe police officers are like, how are you buying properties? How do you have enough money to this afford? And now I have the epiphany to go, hey, instead of buying that new Chevy Corvette, I was just driving the same car, delaying gratification, being frugal and taking all of my earned income that I could. So all the income from being a police officer, all the income that I was earning from just living in the house for free and pouring into new properties. And that's how I was able to build my rental portfolio relatively quickly. So there's other strategies, like I said, maybe you only rent one room, so it's more comfortable for you. Maybe you don't want to have a 4-bedroom house that has 3 other roommates. Maybe that's going to be a little bit too much. I did eventually get frustrated with the roommates after 3 years. I moved out, I sold the property, redeployed that capital into other rental properties. And maybe you're not a single guy. So back then I was single, now I'm married with 2 kids, and that strategy wouldn't work. I would be sleeping on the couch or out in the front yard if I was to propose this strategy now to my wife. But some people that are married do this strategy. They do rent out portions of their home. When we were married, even before kids, we did use a portion of our home and we rented it out on Airbnb, and it paid for the majority of our mortgage even back then. So we moved into another property, Airbnb the basement room. And usually it worked really well for us as a family as if we didn't have a shared space. So it would be a dedicated space for a guest. When we did it as Airbnb, the space was dedicated. They have a little kitchenette and they never had to come into our space, the kitchen, the living room. They just could access from an outside door to their room, and they would be basically have that space, their own bathroom, and then they could leave through that door. So we'd never interact. And I found that was really easy. So that's a really good strategy that you can do. If you're married, have kids, you don't want to have interactions with a guest. I wouldn't want to have strangers coming in with my kids. And even in this house that I'm currently in, that I'm filming in, we utilized the basement. I turned it into an Airbnb, and when we first moved in this house, I renovated that specifically for that purpose, and we rented it out for 10 months during the pandemic. And during that time, they paid for the entire renovation. So we renovated that space, made it really nice, had a person in there that could access from the outside, go outside, so they didn't come up into the house at all. And having them in there for 10 months paid for the entire basement rent. So it just shows you what you can do when you are eliminating some of that expense, that housing expense. Another strategy you can utilize in an ADU, or an accessory dwelling unit. And this is becoming extremely popular in California because housing's so dang expensive. They probably have like 40 or 50% of their incomes going towards housing. So what this strategy is you end up building another property on your lot. So maybe you have a house, and then you build another property on that lot and you rent out this property. Sometimes it's just a second building, or sometimes it's a smaller structure. You're lowering your overall housing costs by subsidizing it with rent. So there's some different strategies of how you can use house hacking and how you can grow your wealth. I hope you like this video. If you could, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in another episode.